11 years of fraud collapsed in 90 seconds. That's how long it took one question, a single surgical question, to unravel a CFO named Victor Ashworth. And when his own attorney looked at him across that deposition table, I'm told the man actually mouthed the words, "We're done." But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back 3 years, to a woman named Elena Vasquez, and to the moment she realised her entire career had been built on numbers that didn't exist. Elena was a senior financial analyst at Meridian Dynamics, a mid-sized manufacturing company outside of Cincinnati. 1,200 employees, aerospace components. The kind of company that makes parts you've never heard of for planes you've definitely flown on. She'd been there for 7 years, started as a junior analyst, worked her way up, earned a reputation for being the person who could find a needle in a haystack of spreadsheets. Her colleagues used to joke that Elena could smell a rounding error from 3 departments away, and she loved it. Genuinely loved it. Not the company itself, Meridian was fine, nothing special, but the work, the puzzle of it. Financial analysis is detective work if you do it right, and Elena did it right. Her boss was a man named Derek Chen, Director of Financial Planning. Good guy, fair, the kind of manager who remembered your kid's name and actually meant it when he asked how your weekend was. And above Derek sat Victor Ashworth, Chief Financial Officer. Now, Victor was a different species entirely. 23 years in executive finance, board seats at 2 non-profits, a Harvard MBA he managed to mention in every conversation. The man had a corner office with a view of the parking lot, but he'd positioned his desk so visitors couldn't see the parking lot. Only him, backlit by the window like some kind of financial deity. He was charming in that very specific executive way. The kind of charm that makes you feel important while simultaneously reminding you that you're not. Elena had maybe 3 direct conversations with him in 7 years. That was normal. CFOs don't typically chat with senior analysts. There's a hierarchy, and Victor Ashworth believed in hierarchy the way some people believe in gravity. Here's what you need to understand about Meridian Dynamics. For 11 years straight, they had beaten their quarterly projections. Every single quarter. In the manufacturing sector, that's not just impressive, it's almost statistically impossible. Raw material costs fluctuate, supply chains hiccup, customers delay orders. The idea that a company could predict its performance with that kind of accuracy for over a decade, it made Victor Ashworth a legend. He'd been featured in CFO Magazine twice. He spoke at conferences about predictive financial modelling. Other companies tried to poach him constantly. Meridian's board had given him 3 retention bonuses over the years, totaling over $2 million. Specifically because his forecasting was considered a competitive advantage. And Elena, like everyone else, believed it. Why wouldn't she? She saw the numbers. They added up. The man was good at his job. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Victor Ashworth had been cooking the books since 2013. I'll get to how she discovered it, but first you need to understand what happened in March of 2023, because that's when everything started to crack. Derek called Elena into his office on a Tuesday, closed the door, which he almost never did. "I need you to look at something," he said, "and I need you to keep it between us for now." Elena sat down. "What's going on?" Derek slid a printout across the desk. It was a purchase order from one of their major clients, a defense contractor. The order was for 18 months of components, prepaid. "This came through last week," Derek said. "Victor approved it personally." Elena scanned the document. "Okay, what am I looking at?" "Look at the delivery schedule." She looked. The components were scheduled for delivery starting in June, standard lead time. "Now look at this." Derek handed her another document, Internal Production Capacity Report. "We can't make these parts until September at the earliest. Our injection mold line is backed up, has been for months. Elena felt the first flutter of something wrong. So we're going to miss delivery by 3 months.
That's what I thought, Derek said. So I asked Victor about it. You know what he told me?
What?
Derek leaned back. He said, and I quote, "Don't worry about operations. That's not your department." Now, I don't know about you, but don't worry about it from a CFO when the numbers don't add up. That's not reassurance. That's a red flag wrapped in a dismissal. Elena stared at the documents. He approved a prepaid order for products we physically can't deliver on time. Gets worse, Derek said. I checked with operations anyway. They have no record of any plan to accelerate production. They don't even know this order exists. That night, Elena stayed late. She told herself she was just being thorough, double-checking. Victor was the CFO. He probably had information she didn't. Maybe there was a plan she wasn't aware of. Maybe operations was out of the loop, but the capacity was coming from somewhere else. She started pulling data, purchase orders, revenue recognition, timestamps, client payment records. And that's when she found the first thread. The prepaid order from the defense contractor had been booked as Q1 revenue. All of it. 18 months of payments recognized in a single quarter. Now, if you're not an accountant, let me explain why that matters. Revenue recognition has rules, strict rules. You can't just book money the moment someone pays you. You book it when you've earned it, when you've delivered the goods, when the obligation is fulfilled. If a customer pays you up front for 18 months of products, you recognize that revenue over 18 months, not all at once. What Elena was looking at was a clear violation of GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, the kind of violation that could trigger an SEC investigation. But it was one transaction, one weird entry, maybe an error. So she kept digging. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena pulled 11 years of quarterly reports. She cross-referenced revenue recognition, dates with delivery schedules. She mapped cash receipts against actual product shipments. And what she found made her physically ill. It wasn't one transaction. It wasn't a few isolated errors. It was systematic, deliberate, continuous. For 11 years, Victor Ashworth had been manipulating the timing of revenue recognition to ensure Meridian hit its quarterly targets. He would accelerate revenue from future quarters when the current quarter was short. He would delay expenses by miscategorizing them. He would book deposits as earned income months before products shipped. The fraud wasn't massive in any single quarter, usually 5 to 8% of revenue. Just enough to clear the target, just enough to maintain the streak. But over 11 years? Elena did the math. Meridian had overstated its cumulative revenue by approximately $47 million. $47 million. She sat in her dark office, staring at that number, and she felt the floor drop out from under her career. Here's what I haven't told you yet. Elena had signed off on dozens of quarterly reports. Not the top-level reports, those went through Victor, but the underlying analyses, the component data. Her work fed into the numbers that Victor then manipulated. If this came out, there would be an investigation. And in investigations, everyone who touched the data gets scrutinized. Elena's signature was on documents that had been used to commit fraud. She hadn't known. She hadn't done anything wrong. But proving that? In the middle of an SEC investigation? That's not a guarantee. That's a legal battle. She could have done nothing. Let me be clear about that. Elena could have quietly deleted her personal copies, kept her head down, and hoped Victor's scheme never unraveled on its own. Plenty of people would have made that choice. It's not cowardice, it's survival. She had 2 kids in high school, a mortgage, a husband who'd just started a new business. Walking into a fire when you could walk around it. That's not the obvious move, and for 3 days she considered it. What changed her mind was Derek.
Derek went to Victor again, this time about a different discrepancy, a vendor payment that had been recorded in the wrong fiscal year. Elena wasn't in the room, but Derek told her about it afterward, and his voice was different, quieter, shaken.
He looked at me, Derek said, and he said, "Derek, I've been doing this for 23 years. You've been doing it for 8. If you want to question my methods, you should make sure your own record is spotless first." Elena felt ice in her stomach. What does that mean? It means he knows I've been asking questions. Derek looked at her. And Elena? He asked where I was getting my data. I didn't tell him it was you, but he's not stupid. Now, here's the part where you might start to feel differently about Derek. Because Derek didn't tell Elena to stop digging. He didn't go to HR. He didn't escalate to the board. He backed off. The next week, Derek stopped asking questions. He stopped mentioning discrepancies. When Elena tried to bring up the purchase order issue, he changed the subject. "I have kids too," he said finally. "I can't afford to be wrong about this." And Elena understood. She didn't blame him, not entirely. Fear makes people small. She'd been wrestling with the same fear for days. But she also realized something. If she was going to do anything about this, she was going to do it alone. Elena started building a file. Not on her work computer, she wasn't stupid. She bought a cheap laptop from Best Buy, paid cash, and started recreating her analysis from home. She printed documents when Victor was out of the office. She photographed her screen instead of downloading files. She was careful, methodical, paranoid in exactly the right ways. What she didn't do was go to HR. I know some of you are thinking she should have. That's the official channel. That's what you're supposed to do. But Elena had been in corporate America for 15 years. She knew what HR was for. HR exists to protect the company. And right now, the company's interests were aligned with Victor Ashworth's interests, at least until someone proved otherwise. If she went to HR with accusations against the CFO, one of two things would happen. They'd investigate and find nothing because Victor would destroy the evidence. Or they'd investigate and find everything and quietly offer Elena a severance package with an NDA attached to make the whole thing go away. Neither of those outcomes was justice. She needed a lawyer. The woman's name was Patricia Okonkwo, employment attorney, 12 years of experience, the last 4 focused on whistleblower cases. Elena found her through a legal referral service and paid for a consultation out of her own pocket. Patricia listened for 45 minutes without interrupting. Then she asked one question. "Are you prepared to lose your job over this?" Elena had thought about it. "Yes." "Are you prepared to be blacklisted from your industry?" Longer pause. "I don't know, because that's what happens sometimes." Patricia's voice was kind but direct. "You do everything right, you report through proper channels, you're legally protected on paper, and somehow, 5 years later, you're working as a consultant making half what you used to because every company in your sector knows you're the one who blew the whistle." "So what are you telling me?" Elena asked. "Don't do it?" Patricia shook her head. "I'm telling you to understand what you're walking into. If your evidence is solid, we can build a case. Sarbanes-Oxley protects financial industry whistleblowers. There are SEC bounty programs for reporting securities fraud. If your numbers are right, you could be looking at a significant payment." "How significant?" "For $47 million in fraud over 11 years. If the SEC pursues it and there are penalties," Patricia did maths in her head, 10 to 30% of sanctions collected. Could be 7 figures. Elena blinked. She hadn't even thought about money. "I don't care about—" "You should care about it," Patricia leaned forward, "because caring about it is how you survive this. You're about to become very inconvenient to some very powerful people. Financial incentive isn't. Greed It's armor. It's the difference between being a troublemaker and being someone with legal standing. Elena hired her that day. What followed was 4 months of preparation. Patricia reviewed every document Elena had compiled. She brought in a forensic accountant, a former SEC investigator named Martin, to validate the analysis independently. Martin spent 3 weeks going through the data. "This is real," he said finally. "This is sophisticated, sustained, and absolutely prosecutable." Whoever designed this understood exactly how much they could push before triggering automatic audits. They stayed under the radar for over a decade. Now, what Martin, found that Elena had missed? This is the part that still gives me chills. And if this story is hitting different for you right now, subscribe, because the workplace stories people send me keep getting more insane. Anyway, Martin found something else. It wasn't just revenue timing manipulation. Victor had created a shell subsidiary, a small company called Meridian Technical Services LLC. On paper, it provided consulting services to the parent company. In reality, it did almost nothing. But over 11 years, Meridian Dynamics had paid Meridian Technical Services over $4 million in consulting fees. Guess who owned 40% of Meridian Technical Services? Victor Ashworth's wife. The revenue manipulation was bad. Securities fraud, career-ending, potentially criminal. But the shell company? That was embezzlement. That was theft. That was Victor Ashworth personally stealing from the company he was supposed to protect. Elena had stumbled into something much bigger than a CFO padding his quarterly numbers. "This changes things," Patricia said. "We're not just filing an SEC complaint. We're building a case for multiple federal charges." The complaint was filed in November 2023. And then, nothing happened. For 3 months, nothing happened. The SEC acknowledged receipt. A case number was assigned. And then silence. Elena went to work every day. She sat in meetings with Victor Ashworth. She nodded at his presentations about forecasting methodology. She watched him accept a Finance Leader of the Year award from the Cincinnati Business Council. And she said nothing. Do you know how hard that is? Sitting across from someone who you know is a fraud. Watching them smile and shake hands and take credit for numbers they fabricated. "Trust the process," Patricia told her. "SEC investigations are slow. They're thorough. That's why they work." But Elena was starting to crack. Not from guilt, from isolation. She couldn't tell Derek. She couldn't tell her colleagues. She couldn't even tell her husband the full scope of what she'd reported, because Patricia had advised against it. She was carrying a secret that could destroy the company, and she had to smile through the Christmas party like nothing was wrong. February 2024, still nothing from the SEC. But something else happened. Victor Ashworth called an all-hands meeting in the finance department. 23 people in a conference room, and Victor standing at the front with a disappointed expression that Elena had never seen before. "It has come to my attention," he said, "that certain individuals in this department have been asking inappropriate questions about our financial reporting processes." Elena's blood went cold. "I want to be clear," Victor continued. "Our reporting is exemplary. It has been validated by external auditors for over a decade. If anyone has concerns about our methods, the appropriate channel is to speak with me directly, privately, not to spread rumors, not to pull unauthorized data, not to waste company resources on personal vendettas." He wasn't looking at Elena. He was looking at Derek. "Derek," Victor said, "I'd like to see you in my office after this meeting." The meeting ended. Everyone filed out. Derek didn't look at Elena as he walked toward Victor's office. She didn't see him for the rest of the day. At 4:47 p.m.,
An email went out from HR. Derek Chen is no longer with Meridian Dynamics. We wish him well in his future endeavors. No warning, no transition period, no explanation. 12 years at the company ended in a single afternoon. Elena went home that night and threw up. She called Patricia. They fired Derek. Victor figured out he was asking questions and fired him. That's retaliation, Patricia said immediately. That's actually useful. Can you document it? Document it? They fired the only other person who knew something was wrong. I'm next, Patricia. He knows. He has to know. Elena, listen to me. If you're fired in the next 6 months after filing an SEC complaint, that's textbook retaliation. That strengthens your case. I know that's cold comfort, but I have 2 kids. Silence. I know, Patricia said. I know. But you're protected. More protected than Derek was. You have legal standing he didn't have. Elena didn't sleep that night. Or the next. On the 3rd day, the SEC called Patricia. They had completed their preliminary review. They had questions. They wanted to meet with Elena in person. This is good, Patricia said. This means they're taking it seriously. How seriously? Seriously enough that they're sending 2 investigators and a staff attorney. Seriously enough that they asked about the subsidiary. Elena, I think they already knew. What do you mean they knew? I mean, I think someone else reported something, or there was a separate audit flag. Either way, you're not the only thread they're pulling. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Elena walked them through everything. The revenue timing, the patterns, the shell company, the forensic accountant's analysis, the firing of Derek Chen. One of the investigators, a woman named Sandra, asked question after question. Detailed questions. Questions that told Elena the SEC had done their own homework. And then Sandra asked the question that would eventually end Victor Ashworth's career. Ms. Vasquez, in your analysis, did you find any evidence that Mr. Ashworth conducted these manipulations with explicit board knowledge? Elena hesitated. I don't think so. The board gets sanitized reports. Victor controls what information reaches them. So in your assessment, this was conducted unilaterally, without oversight? Yes, I believe Victor has been doing this alone. Sandra wrote something down. That's consistent with what we found. Thank you. After the meeting, Elena asked Patricia what that question meant. It means they're deciding whether this is just a Victor problem or a company problem, Patricia said. If the board didn't know, Meridian might survive this. If they did know, or should have known, everyone goes down. March 2024. The SEC formally opened an investigation into Meridian Dynamics. Elena wasn't named publicly, whistleblower protections kept her identity sealed, but Victor Ashworth was notified that the company was under investigation for securities violations. And here's where things got interesting. Victor didn't panic. He didn't shred documents. He didn't flee the country. He hired lawyers, good ones. 3 partners from a white shoe firm in Columbus. He released a statement through the company calling the investigation routine and expressing full confidence in Meridian's accounting practices. And then he did something Elena didn't expect. He promoted her. I'm not joking. 2 weeks after the SEC investigation began, Elena Vasquez was promoted to Director of Financial Analytics. A 20% raise, a corner office. Glowing praise from HR about her exceptional analytical contributions. What is this? She asked Patricia. It's a trap, Patricia said. If he fires you now, it's obvious, retaliation, but if he promotes you and then later fires you for performance issues, it muddies the waters. He's buying time. He's setting up a paper trail where he looks like a supportive executive. So what do I do? You accept the promotion. You do excellent work. You don't give him any ammunition, and you wait. The waiting was the hardest part. Weeks turned into months. The SEC investigation churned invisibly. Lawyers sent letters. Documents were requested, but nothing public happened. Elena saw Victor in the hallway occasionally. He smiled at her, congratulated her on the promotion, asked about her kids. It was surreal, like having coffee with someone who doesn't know you've already testified against them. And then, in August 2024, the deposition started. A deposition is essentially testimony under oath, taken outside of a courtroom. Both sides get to ask questions. Everything is recorded. Lies in a deposition are perjury. Victor's lawyers had prepared him extensively. Elena knew this because one of them had accidentally CC'd a prep document to the wrong email address, a paralegal at Patricia's firm who shared a last name with someone at Victor's firm. The document detailed 3 days of preparation: mock questions, coached answers, strategies for deflecting difficult queries. Victor was ready. Or so he thought. The SEC attorney handling the deposition was named Thomas Park, 43 years old, unremarkable in appearance. The kind of man you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. But Thomas Park had a particular skill. He listened. Not just to answers, to patterns, to the things people didn't say, to the micro-hesitations that revealed where the bodies were buried. The deposition started normally enough. Background questions, employment history, general questions about Meridian's financial reporting structure. Victor was smooth, polished. His answers were careful but confident. 3 hours in, his lawyers looked relaxed. Then Thomas Park asked about the quarterly forecasting process. Mr. Ashworth, you're known in your industry for your forecasting accuracy. 11 years of meeting or exceeding projections. Can you walk me through your methodology? Victor smiled. This was his territory. He launched into an explanation of proprietary modelling systems, historical data analysis, appropriate. Thomas wrote something down. And these changes, when appropriate, are they documented, tracked? I don't believe there's a formal tracking system, no. It's professional judgment, as I said. Mr. Ashworth, I'd like to read you something. He opened a folder. This is an internal email from January 2019. It's from you to yourself, a calendar reminder. The text reads, Q4 adjustment, plus 2.3 million to hit target. Book to MTS for reconciliation. The room went very quiet. MTS, Thomas continued. That's Meridian Technical Services, correct? The subsidiary your wife partially owns. Victor's lawyer spoke immediately. We'd like to take a brief recess. In a moment. Thomas didn't look up. Mr. Ashworth, what does book to MTS for reconciliation mean in the context of adjusting quarterly numbers? Nothing from Victor. Mr. Ashworth? I'd like to consult with my attorney. You can consult with your attorney, but the question is on the record. The email is authenticated. We obtained it from your corporate server. When you return, I'll need an answer. The recess lasted 45 minutes. When they returned, Victor's lead attorney spoke first. My client will answer questions, but we want to note our objection to the characterization of this email as evidence of wrongdoing. Noted. Thomas shuffled papers. Mr. Ashworth, the email? Victor cleared his throat. That email refers to a legitimate reconciliation process. Technical services provided actual consulting work. The payments were for services rendered. I see. Thomas pulled out another document. This is the service record for Meridian Technical Services from 2013 to 2023. Can you show me the work product from the consulting engagement referenced in that email? Silence. Mr. Ashworth? I don't have those documents with me. They don't exist, Mr. Ashworth. Thomas's voice didn't change, but something in the room shifted. We've reviewed the complete records of Meridian Technical Services. In 11 years, the company produced no documented work product, no reports, no analyses, no deliverables of any kind. It received $4 million from Meridian Dynamics and produced nothing. Victor's attorney leaned in, whispered something. Victor shook his head slightly. Thomas continued. Additionally, we've identified a pattern in which payments to MTS correlate precisely with quarters where Meridian's actual performance fell short of projections. In every quarter where there was a shortfall, a payment to MTS appeared that exactly offset the gap. The probability of this occurring by chance is effectively zero. He looked at Victor. Mr. Ashworth, here is my question. For 11 years, did you use Meridian Technical Services as a vehicle to fabricate revenue and personally profit from securities fraud? And then came the moment. 90 seconds of silence. Victor's attorney said, "Don't answer that." But Victor was already broken. You could see it. The composure that had carried him through 23 years of executive confidence cracked open. He looked at Thomas Park. He looked at his attorney. He looked at the court reporter still typing nothing because there was nothing to type. And then he said 4 words that ended his career. I want a deal. His own attorney actually grabbed his arm. Victor, stop talking. No, Victor pulled away. No, I'm not going to prison to protect people who don't even know what I've done for them. The board, the investors, they've been riding my numbers for a decade. I made them money, I made them look good, and I'm the only one who goes down. Thomas Park sat back. Are you saying you want to cooperate with this investigation? Victor's attorney stood up. This deposition is over. My client is clearly distressed. Sit down, Robert. Everyone looked at Victor. Sit down. His voice was quiet. I'm tired. I've been tired for 11 years. Do you know what it takes to keep that streak going? Every quarter, finding the money. Every quarter, making sure nobody looked too closely. 11 years. He looked at Thomas. What kind of deal are we talking about? The cooperation agreement took 3 weeks to negotiate. Victor Ashworth pleaded guilty to securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. In exchange for full cooperation, including testimony against anyone else involved, his recommended sentence would be reduced. What did full cooperation reveal? Remember when Sandra from the SEC asked Eleanor if the board knew? It turned out one board member did. Charles Whitman, the chair of the audit committee. He'd noticed discrepancies in 2018 and approached Victor privately. Victor convinced him that the adjustments were immaterial and temporary, just smoothing until the company stabilized. Charles had accepted that explanation. He'd also accepted $400,000 in consulting payments from Meridian Technical Services over the following 5 years. Charles Whitman was arrested in October 2024. Derek Chen was reinstated with back pay. He was offered his old position back. He declined. "I spent 8 months applying for jobs," he told Elena when they finally reconnected. "I lost my house. My wife almost left me. Meridian can't give me that time back." He took a job at a smaller company. Less money, less stress. He said it was better. And Elena? Her SEC whistleblower claim was validated. Meridian Dynamics paid $23 million in penalties and restitution. The SEC awarded Elena 18% of the collected sanctions, $4.1 million. She quit the next day. "Do you feel vindicated?" Patricia asked her at their final meeting. Elena thought about it. "No," she said finally. "I feel tired. I feel like I did the right thing and it cost me 2 years of my life. I feel like Derek lost his career because he asked questions and I was the one who gave him the questions to ask." She paused. "I feel like Victor Ashworth stole 11 years from a company that trusted him, and he's going to serve maybe 4 years, and then he'll write a book about redemption and end up on a podcast circuit." "That's probably true," Patricia admitted. "But I also feel like if I hadn't said anything, he'd still be doing it. Still smiling at holiday parties, still getting lifetime achievement awards. And the next person who noticed something would have the same choice I had." She looked at Patricia. "So, vindicated? No. But satisfied? Maybe. Maybe satisfied is enough." Victor Ashworth was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. With good behaviour, he'll serve 4.5. His wife Rachel divorced him 3 months after the indictment. The money from Meridian Technical Services had been invested in a house in her name only. She kept all of it. Some people would say that's poetic justice. Others would say it's just more injustice wearing a different face. Honestly, I'm not sure where I land on it. Charles Whitman pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and received 2 years probation, no prison time. He's 67 and had no prior record. The judge called him a man who made poor choices under extraordinary pressure. Meridian Dynamics survived, barely. The stock dropped 40% after the scandal broke. They hired a new CFO from outside the company, a woman named Jennifer Torres, who'd spent 20 years at a Big Four accounting firm. Her first act was instituting quarterly external audits. And Derek? Derek reached out to Elena 6 months after everything settled. They met for coffee. He'd gained weight. He looked happier. "You know what I keep thinking about," he said. "That meeting, when Victor said his observations were the documentation, I should have walked out right then." "Why didn't you?" He shrugged. "Same reason you didn't. Mortgage, kids, believing that someone else would handle it." "But someone else never handles it," Elena said. "No, someone else never handles it." They finished their coffee. They promised to stay in touch. Elena doubted they would. Some relationships are built on shared trauma. When the trauma ends, sometimes the relationship ends too. That's not sad. That's just how people work. Elena used part of her settlement to start a consulting practice, financial forensics. She helps small companies audit their books, identify discrepancies before they become disasters. She told me once that her favourite clients are the ones who call her because they think something's wrong, but they're afraid to look. "Looking is hard," she said, "but not looking is how you end up with 11 years of fraud.
And nobody to blame but the system. The question that broke Victor Ashworth, did you personally modify the forecasted numbers, seems simple in retrospect, obvious even. But it took 4 months of investigation to find the right email to build that question around. It took an analyst who noticed a purchase order that didn't make sense. It took a lawyer who specialized in cases most people never file. One question ended 11 years of deception. But 1,000 questions, small, careful, methodical, built the path to that moment. The stories people send me keep getting wilder. Subscribe if you want to hear what drops next. Some of these I genuinely can't believe are real. And if you've ever sat in a meeting where the numbers didn't add up and you couldn't figure out why, I want to know what you did. Did you ask the question? Or did you let it go? There's no wrong answer, but I'm curious. Because someone, somewhere, is sitting in that meeting right now. And they're deciding,